Hi, I'm Tom from MVP Chess, and welcome to Your Move, where I analyze chess.com member games. Be sure to like, comment, share, and subscribe, and do check out my website, www.mvpchess.com, or scan the QR code below. Right. So, I will be analyzing a game submitted by JohanVA. He's a player from Belgium, rated 1657, who's playing a very strong opponent. A player from Azerbaijan rated 2213. So he's nearly giving up 600 points in ELO. So the game starts off e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop c4, the Italian game. And after bishop c5, Johan plays in Paul Morphy style, straight out of the Romantic era, and plays the Evans Gambit. And the idea with this opening is, after bishop takes b4, why not? To refute a gambit, you need to accept it. White's able to play c3 and then d4 and expand in the center very quickly. So black captures, and the first critical moment in the game happens right here. Johan decides to castle. Interesting choice. So, over to you. Ask yourself, why did Johan castle here as opposed to capturing on d4? And what was black's response? Pause your videos now and try to find the continuation. Okay, Johan's playing for tricks here. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. He's hoping that black will play d takes c3 rather, and after bishop takes f7, king takes f7, queen d5, white will have this nice double attack winning back the piece, and black will have a really difficult time developing these pieces on the king side and coordinating his forces. So white would definitely have a great position there. Black saw that idea. You know, this is a 2200, so he's probably well versed in opening theory, you know, playing this provocative move, bishop c5 after c3. And he plays the move d3. I love this move. You can think of it almost as a desperado. Black recognizes that this pawn can't be saved. It's doomed. So he wants to give it up, but he wants to give it up on his terms. And now, instead of having a nice, strong central pawn duo on e4 and d4, Johan's kind of got a more fractured pawn structure, and this pawn on c3 is also preventing the knight from coming to its best square on c3. So I think from a positional perspective, black has definitely gained something with this really nice desperado pawn move, d3. I really, really like that move. So black continues development, d6. Johan develops with tempo, bishop g5. Black blocks, of course. And Johan completes his development, meaning his rooks are connected, with the move knight bd2. And black castles. So we've got a pretty good position so far. I do think black's better here. I don't think Johan has full compensation for the gambited pawn, specifically because he doesn't have the strong center that he should if he had played c takes d4. But okay, the game goes on. So Johan is trying to activate and centralize this knight with knight b3. Black correctly retreats. He doesn't want to leave it there and have to take back with his d-pawn and shatter his pawn structure. And Johan establishes a knight on d4. Notice it's taken the knight 3 tempi to get here to really kind of influence the center of the board, whereas if that pawn were on d4 where it should be, he could have played knight c3 in one go and used those extra moves, for instance, to centralize his rooks. So black starts what I think is an exchange operation with knight e5. Black knows I'm up a clean pawn. White doesn't really have dynamic compensation the way he should. I want to exchange pieces because that will reduce my opponent's attacking potential and his counterplay, which is a great idea when you're up in material to try to reach a winning endgame. So Johan recognizes he can't give up this light squared bishop. That's a good choice. So often in the Italian and the Ruy Lopez, this light squared bishop ends up being the best minor piece that white has. So white exchanges and plants the knight on f5. This is kind of a tricky move. And Johan found a nice idea to pose a problem for his opponent to solve. So, black to move in this position, what would you play with black? Pause your videos and find the best one. Okay, it's tempting to play queen takes d3, right? You are ahead in material. Exchanging queens would be very favorable because that would really get rid of white's counterplay and make black's conversion much easier. But the problem with this is it fails tactically to knight takes e7 and intermezzo with check. The king would have to step to h8, and then and only then black recaptures on d3 and is recaptures on d3 and is up a clean piece. But black is a strong player and spotted this idea and correctly played the move bishop takes f5. Nice move, eliminating this knight. We have an exchange of queens, and then Johan captures on e7. Looks nice at first because black has two pieces on prise, the bishop on f5 and this rook on d8. But because this bishop on e7 is undefended, Johan can play rook d7. Johan's opponent can play rook d7 and regain the extra piece. But Johan is first to the d file. He grabs this strategically important d file first. So I think because of that factor and also the presence of opposite square bishops, I would say this position is roughly equal. Even though Johan is down a pawn, I think he's got really good chances to hold a draw, which would be a great result against a player nearly 600 points higher than him. So black begins to centralize his king, which is a great idea to do in the endgame. And Johan does this nice little maneuver, bishop d5, c6, bishop e4. I'm not sure if this is the best move. I should point out here that I've analyzed this game without an engine. I think it's important to do. It's one of the ways I promote active learning, not only in my own game, but with my students. And it's a really important skill to develop, specifically for identifying the critical positions in chess games and where you could have improved. It's just not something that you can get when the engine or game review is just spoon feeding you the best moves in every position. So I like this because it blockades this pawn on e5. It lends extra support to this potentially weak pawn on f5. And you can imagine a scenario in an endgame where this bishop gets to c8 and pressures these queenside pawns. So I like this move a lot. Again, I don't know if it's best, but I like this move. Okay, and after g6, Johan correctly plays rook d3. Great decision, maintaining the pawn tension here. It might be tempting to play f takes g6, thinking, I've got this pawn at f5, it's doubled, it's potentially weak. Let me take this opportunity just to liquidate it. But this would be a mistake because after black recaptures, he can follow up with f5, driving back this bishop, and then maybe e4, and then advancing the king. And all of a sudden, these pawns that were blockaded and restricted have all of a sudden become mobile. And now black's position comes to life. So great job by Johan maintaining the tension here and not giving black what he wants. Most importantly, he's able to meet the move rook d8 with rook fd1 and keep control over this key open file. So really nice rook play and pawn play by Johan. And then black plays king g7. Now black is just trying to force matters. He wants to resolve the tension with this f-pawn. And he's hoping to play king f6 and provoke Johan into capturing on g6 and going into the lines that we just discussed. But Johan doesn't bite. g4, king f6, h4. Really nice restrictive pawn play by Johan in this position. I really like his play here. Denying the king's squares, denying the king access to the king side, and maintaining this pawn tension and not giving in. Really nice job, really nice patient play. So black finally decides to break the tension, and it comes at the cost of fracturing his kingside pawn structure a bit. But he's hoping that after bishop takes f5 and e4, that he can get a little something going. He wanted to break the blockade on this e-pawn and try to activate this rather passive rook on e7. Now, the rook is attacked right now. White needs to move it. Over to you. Where is the best square for the rook in this position? Okay, I think the best move in this position is rook d7. Again, I'm not using an engine, but just from a positional perspective, this would force the exchange of rooks. We would have opposite colored bishops. And even though white's down a pawn, white's got so many pawns on light squares here to target with his light squared bishop. I would imagine that white would restore the material balance. Even if he doesn't, I still think he's got great drawing chances, even down a pawn, given the drawish nature of opposite color bishop endgames. But instead, Johan plays rook d6, and this is where he started to kind of lose the thread a bit. This allows black to play king e5, a very desirable move. Now black's king is in a very nice centralized position in the endgame, and he got it with a gain of time against this rook. Johan still has the opportunity here to play rook d7, which is what I would recommend. And even though we're looking at the same position a tempo down, remember, if he had played rook d7 immediately, the king would have been on f6. Now the king's on e5. Even though we've given black a move, I still think that this is a pretty equal endgame. Again, because of the opposite color bishops and because of all these light square weaknesses that white can attack. But unfortunately, Johan plays rook h6, which, believe it or not, is basically a losing move. Given the unprotected and undefended nature of this piece. This is something that I really talk about a lot with my students. In fact, I just had a lesson this week where we solely focused on the topic of loose pieces dropping off for tournament preparation for one of my scholastic students. And here it comes up again, time and time again. So, black to play in this position. What move did black play to completely turn this game on its head and take the initiative? Over to you. Okay, black was really alert this game and played pawn to e3. Great move. The justification being is that if white were to capture, black's got this really nice fork, this double attack on the king and the rook, and white's completely busted. Conversely, white doesn't have time to capture on h7 because after pawn to e2, the f2 square is unavailable. The pawn's there. If the pawn wasn't there, the bishop would be defending it, and white doesn't have access to the f1 square, and this pawn is just going to promote. White can resign. So Johan played the only try in the position, and that's king f1. But after pawn takes f2, yikes. Black has established a monster passed pawn on f2 that really restricts white's king. And after Johan grabs a pawn for his troubles, why not? I think that's the only source of counterplay for white in the position, is to somehow get this pawn going. But after king f4, all of a sudden, it's just amazing after this move e3 how perfectly coordinated black's pieces have become. You know, the rook on e7 was passive but for a long time, but now it's just like a rock star piece. We've got this bishop bearing down on white's position. Notice this is the same position that we could have traded off most likely had Johan played c takes d4 in the opening. But we left this diagonal open, we left this bishop on the board, and it came back to hurt us in the endgame. Johan hurries back to try to mount some sort of fortress defensive setup. I think he's hoping to use the bishop and king to blockade the f1 square, but it's to no avail because after rook e1 check, king g2, and the nice move rook g1, white's completely busted and Johan understandably resigned. But really good game by Johan, and I like that he's challenging himself with longer time controls and playing much stronger players. That's a great way to improve. So I hope you enjoyed the first episode of Your Move. If you want me to analyze your games, be sure to follow my blog on chess.com. The link's in the description. And also be sure to subscribe to my channel and also leave some comments, either with your games or what you thought about the analysis. Thanks for watching.